In 1095, there's a growing problem. The Knights of Christendom are warring with one another, and this is deadly for the peasants, and it's also hindering any burgeoning trade. Overall, it's just bad for the church, and it has to stop.
The grass around the pavilion should have been greener, but too many had matted it down, waiting to die. A mix of the arrogant and mighty stridently stood in the field, waiting their chance to face Alexander de Hirsaw. One impatiently scuffed his boots, kicking the turf. Another betrayed, then hid his terror, scratching dirt to cover the poolet of his own urine. All would be slain, or worse, hideously maimed. Carthusian monks were on hand and ready to tend to the wounded and comfort the dying. Bone flecks, the remnants of yesterday's hand-to-hand, littered the clearing.
I will be playing Peter, and I am a soldier, a man of justice, and I will be using the rules of Quintessential Paladin here. You can see Peter the Hermit. Now let's see how far I get. When the Pope at Claremont, I'm not there at Claremont, and neither is my brother, Peter Bartholomew. Actually, the Bishop Adhemar is the true head of the First Crusade, and he is the one who's tasked by the Pope. He accepts the cross of Urban II to go to the Holy Lands and recapture Jerusalem, mostly move the errant knights, the knights without lands, out of Europe and take them to the Far East and establish a kingdom there that can pay tribute back. There was also an ulterior motive because at this time, the Eastern Church, the Orthodox religion, had split from the Western religion many years before, and there was a hope that this crusade could reconcile the two. And so Bishop Adhemar, he's the one that tasks my brother, my younger brother. I am the first son, so I'm the military man. I should have inherited lands, but there was no lands to inherit it. Or maybe I'm the second son, and my brother is third son who went into the church, and who knows where the older brother is, running estates and not sharing any of the wealth. Now, Peter Bartholomew, my brother, he refuses to let me, as kinsman, help collect any of the tithes that he's been told Bishop Adhemar to go collect. That's his mistake. Better to have me as an insider than a competitor. Brother Bart, as I will call him, is a zealot who believes in miracles and raises money by mostly strong-arming the Jews. Yes, we play a historically accurate game with all its brutality. Now, I decide instead, as Peter the Hermit, to raise a goodly fanatic army and actually go to the Holy Lands myself. God wills it, of course. Quite the mindset. And you might note that I am named Peter, and so is my brother. Let's make this clear. My mother thought it was very reverent to name all of her sons Peter and all of her daughters Mary. Hereafter, I probably would call my rival Bart. Well, I'm just going to be Peter the Hermit, or the Peter of our story. For essentially, once I stop bathing, people will begin to believe I'm either a madman or a prophet, and hopefully both by my dice rolls. So with the introductions out of the way, we can go into two-page roleplay here, and we can go through our first encounter. So now, after my meeting with my brother, Bart, I head north. Now, I will be following the path of the Children's Crusade in green here, while Bishop Adhemar collects the Knights of Europe, the unlanded Knights of Europe, and assembles them mostly on ships and ends up sailing to the Holy Lands. So we're going to follow the green. But right now, I'm right here. I'm going to move up the coast a little bit to Paris. And at Paris, I'm going to try to recruit my first NPC.
A resounding metal-on-metal crack echoed through the clearing. Percival did not see the sword strike, nor would he feel the effect for long. Cut short in his words, he sat silent and upright in his saddle, the screws that held him in place securely fastened. His adversary's blade cleanly dented Percival's helm just above the right ear. The forearm that snapped the attack had extended and retracted in under a third of a second, producing a 2-inch deep fissure, the force of the impact immediately liquefying a pencil-thin line of the skull. A slight pleating of the helmet metal casing clamped the wound taut, under pressure. The counterblow, casually delivered some seconds later, completely unnecessary and issued only for dramatic effect, struck flatly on the other side of Percival's head. This tilted and popped the man's top, producing a stream of ejected brain and brain casing. The line of volunteers thinned, covered by the spray, as several decided tomorrow would be a better day for revenge. And
And so I'm outside of Paris in the area of Nochon in France. I will be watching the affairs of honor to try to pick out a man that I think is both reverent and powerful. And I actually meet a man, and this is an NPC that I'm going to be adding. He's not a historic character, so I can do anything I want with him, within reason. Alexander of Nochon, and he seems a perfect troublemaker for my cause. He's a landless knight who missed the conquest of England. He's a renowned killer, a duelist who is a champion of many older barons, all to which he owes money. He will be my companion, the NPC Soak-Off, if you wish, provided he doesn't die in my first few dice rolls here as I get into the game and roll my first dice as tests of power. Now, I am a man of justice, but how many tests of powers do I need to make? Let's go over to reference page, and I'm going to roll on the pious knight table. If I roll a 1, I'm going to lose my ability to either my plot armor, or I'm going to have to change class. I hope I don't roll a 1, but I'm rolling just on this dice table. I am rolling 1d6 and figuring out what has happened to me. Here it comes. Ha! So I have to defeat a die 6 fell ones. Well, that's okay. I have to change my class to air or lose my plot armor. Now let me go back over to, could be a short game, folks. If I'm an air, I will only roll a single die 6 on any table. Do I want to use my plot armor right here? Well, I prefer not to, because other things might be coming up. So I'm going to be an air for this table. And I'm going to roll 1 dice. I'm still destined on this table to circumvent events. And I need to defeat a die 6. In essence, I'm playing the plot here of I'm watching Alexander, who will be my warrior. Just 1. So I'm going to roll 1 die on tests of prowess, adding 1 to my dice roll to try to defeat 1 felled one. In other words, prove myself in the duels here as Alexander kills repeatedly the people to challenge him in an act of holy faith, of course. It was a difficult time, and I rolled a 6, and that was a beautiful start. It was a low roll to add a little excitement, but I deliver a mighty blow which fells all fell ones. There was only 1, so I felled my guy to basically break the line and tell Alexander of Nochon that we are going to go and recruit the people for this crusade. He's fully on board with my dice roll there, and I still have my plot armor, which is really nice.
Advance boldly as Knights of Christ, and rush as quickly as you can to the defense of the Eastern Church. For she it is from whom the joy of your whole salvation have come forth, who poured into your mouths the milk of divine wisdom, who set before you the holy teaching of the Gospels. We say this, brethren, that you may restrain your murderous hands from the destruction of your brothers, and in behalf of your relatives in faith oppose yourself to the Gentiles. Under Jesus Christ our leader, may you struggle for your Jerusalem. Redeem my holy sepulchre. God wills it.
Now, Alex and I can set off and we can gather an army. If I go back to my campaign map here, the route that I would take would be where I eventually move up to Calais here and start my travels. And the next stop we're going to get to is we're going to try to get to Munich. And on the big map, which I'll try to move as well, a little bit easier to see, I'm going to be here for the next set of encounters. Back to my game. I go to my refs page, and in my ref page, I'm going to roll a d6. And in this case, I'm still going to roll on my pious quest. I'm hopeful that I'm not going to roll another 1 here. And a 4. A 4 is I have to defeat a Dark Knight. All right? Well, that's an interesting proposition. So I and my NPC Soak-Off, Alexander, need to defeat a Dark Knight. The Dark Knight I can defeat with tests of power, which is a man of justice is my best. I'm rolling 2 dice and a 1, and all I need to do is roll a 6 on either dice. In case I don't do that, the results could be either I can add an extra advantage in the game, but it comes with a penalty, or have results which make me lose my ability to gain, say, mighty attacks, wise attacks, and careful attacks. So let me see what happens with this encounter. It's about the spring thaw, and it's about 1096, and we head out. I decide to ride a donkey. We travel to Munich, rabble-rousing all the way there. One encounter of note when we see a group ahead of us that seems to slow down as we slow down, speed up as we speed up, and behind us, suspiciously, a second group arrives, but they are on the march to catch up with us. It sounds like a perfect ambush, and as the encounter table of the referee from Quintessential Paladin is going to prompt, there's a dark knight that I have to defeat. There's probably lots of people that need to be defeated or scared off, but I have Alexander, the killer of the age, to handle most of the riffraff and just, grimace, while I end up with one essential battle that's important for our quest. And so let's see what happens with the dice rolls here. I'm rolling 2 dice on tests of power, 2d6 and taking the higher. And here comes my dice roll. And I get a 3 and 4. But the 4 becomes a 5 because I'm still of destined status. I put these little destined icons around here because I'm constantly forgetting that as I ref more than play. But the 5 it's wise. I could defeat a fell one, but I need to defeat a dark might. Or gain a modifier to treat any roll of 5 as 6. Taking the modifier adds a second dark might to the campaign. Now, just to explain this just a little bit, Quintessential Roleplay works on the systems of checks and balances where there's a certain amount of dark knights in each encounter, but there also is an act of fostering faith. If I can foster faith, I can use it sort of as a fiat to eliminate knights down the road that would be. Now, normally you could set this up in a 4-hour session, a 2-hour session with your friends, and you could say, well, the players need to fight and defeat 6 dark knights by the tables of pious quest or kingly deliberation before they reach the climax, or they can acquire 6 acts of fostering faith and do the same. Back to my play here. I don't want to go too much into the mechanics because I think a 2-page role play, it's really just too easy. If I need to, I don't want to malign any of my good listeners, but really, if I got to explain how to play this 2 dice and take the higher roll, you need to start over with Chutes and Ladders. All right, let's go back to my test of power here. And here comes my 2 dice roll on test of power. It's a 3 and 4. And I'm going to add that second dice roll, second Dark Knight. So I have to defeat 2 Dark Knights, but I'm treating 5s as 6s. Here comes my next dice roll, rolling 2 dice. I rolled a 3 and a 5. 5 becomes a 6. Boom, down goes a Dark Knight. Well, that's convenient. And rolling again, that's a 2 and a 1. Ooh, I slipped up a little bit. That 2 becomes a 3 and I'm jolted. I have to lose either the mighty, wise, or careful. Now I'm going to lose my careful. I don't want to lose my wise because my wise I'm treating as 6s. So it's starting to get a little more interesting here on that final Dark Knight that we're fighting. And here comes my dice roll, 2 dice 6. And I rolled a 2 and a 4. That 4, because I'm destined, becomes a 5. I am wise. I move it up to a 6. I defeated the second Dark Knight. And that will end it there. There were many thugs and people ready to battle. Problems in the Frankish territories, what would become France, of having too many male sons that had nothing better to do. They would be hired by different mercenary groups. They would go to other neighboring smaller counties and raid. And it was a constant game back and forth. But we're going to meet a more disciplined mercenary group, the Swabians. And I want to make note here that the Crusades were really a cosmopolitan affair. I'm probably abusing that word, but a multicultural affair. There was no common language amongst the Crusaders. They often just identified themselves by crossing their fingers as a testament of devotion, walking up on people with fingers crossed. It's also why we think fingers crossed, or at least I did as a child, was a powerful symbol to ward away evil. One very excited, devout fellow, I want to add another NPC here. He's a Saxon, and he just begs to join us. He's just a young lad. He's barely as tall as this Roman shield that he has found. It's freshly painted green. It has this nice rooster emblem on the front. To this, he has added the white cross to signify that he too is taking up the charge. By now, all of the local chapters and churches, all the local priests and monks are preaching to the peasantry that they need to give some of their props over, some of their produce, their goods, their coins, if they have any. Coins are very rare, and give it all over to Mother Church to start funding this crusade. But many of them, especially those who had nothing, decided they would take up arms themselves. They would find the old family heirlooms. They would collect the old junk that was offered to them by local lords, basically move them out of the county and prevent the troublemakers. This kid, kid, Michael. Michael is just a child fighter of the Crusades, so he will join our group.
An octave higher voice proclaimed we had better keep our distance. Alexander asked me whether this could be one of the fabled dwarves of the Black Forest. I wasn't sure if he meant that as sarcasm. "Lad, come out of that thicket. What are you doing?" A boy did not appear. Instead, an ancient Roman scutum pushed its way out of the underbrush. Maybe it was an enchanted imp, trapped in some ancient talisman. He spoke again, an air of authority. "I am Michael, named after the archangel. I fight for the Lord and his servants." "But you have no weapon, little one. You'll need more men to form a tortoise." His face peeked from the left side and stuck out a tongue. I stopped Alex from sending him home with a boot to the back. The shield was freshly painted and well done, a verdant background with centerpiece of a red cock crowing. If I hadn't already had a family crest of that one, I'd have made claim. Michael could grow up to be a fine herald, except his lack of shoes proclaimed him to be lowborn. "You drew this emblem?" The young pilgrim nodded, saying the white crosses were added recently. "Michael, you will be our shield bearer. I cannot make you a squire just yet, as I am not a knight. I am a soldier, and any soldier worth his salt knows a Roman tower shield wielded with tenacity will stop any arrow sent by infidel Turk. Come with us. We too serve the Lord and welcome the ward of an archangel." With that, I handed the kid an apple and gave him a swallow of my wine. Alex shook his head but knew this pilgrim would not be the worst recruit we'd marshal.
I will also start to realize that if I'm really going to pull this off, I need to increase my piety here. So I start traveling with bare feet only, and I refuse to eat meat and fruit. And this is historically what the chroniclers of the age said about Peter the Hermit. I will live almost entirely on fish and wine, maybe the breaking of bread. And I am either supremely inspired by all this or just a master scalawag. There's no way to know. You can post your opinion of my play style in the Space Gamer Vox. I halt at Cologne, a major city, our first waypoint destination. I need a war chest. I can't survive long if we don't have money to pay off bribes and to buy provisions. So I'm here in Germany, in Cologne. I decide that I just need to stay in one place, and Cologne is a larger city of the era. And I start selling locals my hair follicles and anything that falls off my shoulder or anything collected on my donkey. And the penitent seemed to start to treat these specks of dandruff as holy relics. This was an age where everything about life was magical, and everything about life was devoted to Christ and the church. Holy people and holy crusaders, leaders of this events, were just seen as if you just touch the garments of some of these pious members, like myself, Peter the Hermit. I can cure sickness and erase sins, which is also one of the acts that the Pope allowed crusaders, was he forgave all of their sins in advance of all the crimes they're going to commit along the way. That's a very dangerous thing to do with armed young men. My brother, who is actually traveling with us, my brother Bart, he thinks the whole thing is disrespectful, that I should discourage the locals from asking for hair follicles. I'm the Lady Galadriel here. While secretly, he's the one who really believes in the relics and believes in the miracles, and he covets the fact that I seem to be growing in piety, why he's just being frustrated by his lack of ability to collect anything, while more and more followers are coming to me. He too ends up getting a lock of my own hair, and he puts it inside an icon of the Virgin. So we rest at this tavern, and there we meet a French knight, Walter Sans-Avoy, or at least that's who he's called by the tavern keep, or I should say he's called by the tavern keep Walter the Penniless. There's another person, Walter de Poussey. Yes, that's as silly as it sounds. A scoundrel, and he sees the advantages of stealing without the sacrament of confession. So two Walters. So I'm joined by the two Walters. A lot of these characters are, as I said, are from the actual chronicles and the tales of the First Crusade. But they want to know why they should join. The Pope has made a promise to the Crusaders: if anyone through devotion alone and not for the sake of honor or gain goes to Jerusalem to free the Church of God, the journey itself shall take the place of all penance, a lifetime of pardon for sin, and more significantly, forgiveness of debt, which is also part of the reason why Alexander of Noshan is with me, is that he was indebted to so many different barons who would use his prowess to fight.
Most of the patrons of the tavern were farming folk and lazy ones at that. The time was midday and anyone inside was a laggard. Two men sat hunched at a table revealing shorn necks, fingering grotesquely manicured mustaches. A pair of legal rogues, perhaps the finest of an age, for these were French nobles and well armed. I approached and crossed my fingers. They returned the sign and pushed out a seat. I sat with them, taking my turn rolling from the cup of dice. Coins crossed the table, not too many that I would mark either one as a cheat. Walter and Walter, they seemed like they had known each other for a lifetime, though they only met 3 days ago. Walter Sans-Sauveur was from the landlocked middle of France and had come the farthest. The other Walter hailed from the Burgundian coast. Alexander stood by and refused ale. More for us, both Walters seemed to pronounce in unison. Again you can't pay, another crown you owe me. The Burgundian treated his counterpart as inferior. Add it to my tab. Neither held any significant title. The two seemed likable, so I broached the main subject. We are raising an army. You could be captains. We marched to Jerusalem. Someday. I did not want them to get the impression I was a fanatic. Having these two would add more validity to our cause. My brother Bart was already being served by the Swabians we met. I was falling behind, not in number of soldiers, but in quality. The two men looked me over. I was ragged but armed. I was bone-thin but muscular taut. When they heard my name, they showed true interest. They were ready for this great hunt. They asked me how soon I expected to leave. South. I corrected, east, not south. I added wryly that the Pope may not truly expect us to fight. Walter agreed, saying that he heard tell the Normans started debate on sending an army. Robert, son of William, will lead them. The other Walter firmly disagreed. A prince here, in freezing nowhere of Cologne? Hardly. Why would any man with money need to go on this quest? Once he takes his father's throne, Robert has no need for debt forgiveness. That would be daft. The chastisement made his companion go silent. They had a pecking order, with the aggressor berating his more sullen and emotional counterpart. Men on the march can be expected only to obey orders, not become lifelong friends.
Men start to come to me realizing that, is it true that the Pope said all my sins will be forgiven if I join this Holy Crusade? Yes, if we make it to the Holy Sepulchre, the tomb of Christ in Jerusalem, we will be absolved of all our sins and we are sure to make it to heaven. People are going to join that. Because we're playing a game here and I want to demonstrate the mechanics of the game, and all could come to a brutal end right here in this tavern and roll a single die 6. I rolled a 5. I need to circumvent a scourge to foster faith. But a scourge, I'm still can defeat that on my test of power here. So I'm going to roll 2 dice as a test of power. And the scourge is, I'm going to call it the scourge of doubt. I need to eliminate the scourge of doubt amongst my 2 Walters, Walter the Penniless and Walter Crusade. Yes, I'm going to say that way too many times because I find it somewhat childish in a teen sort of humorous way. And here comes my dice roll. 2 dice, adding 1 because I'm destined. And I rolled a 5 and a 6. A 6 is mighty act, a mighty act that allows me to circumvent the scourge. We now have starting to attract people from all lands, they even as far away as the Scots. And everyone starts wearing these little patches of cloth that are cut in the shape of the cross, and they quickly just sew right onto their garments. The actual crusade my crusade is joined by bishops. That's how powerful the temptation was to move on. Prelates, many clerks of the court. These are educated men, and they are going, and knights too. The pious are coming by the Pope's order, joining us because we seem ready to act. Actually, doers seem to get noticed in any age. And by this moment, I have assembled 15,000 mercenaries, men-at-arms. Now, most of them are German, and they are under their own subcommanders, Gorshak and Oral. Yet far more are making the pledge to join the journey. It just, the very act, it just beats farming. It's better to eat someone else's crops than try to grow your own. We send 4 scouts to warn nobles we are coming. We head out with this naivete that we are expected as pilgrims to be allowed safe passage through the Christian lands of the Kingdom of Hungary. And we also are expecting, even demanding, Christian hospitality. So, I become the de facto leader of the Peregrini Christi, the Pilgrims of Christ, from the swelling Catholic ranks. We still have the entirety of Europe to cross. Let me go to this chart here. You know, a lot of people, when they think of the Crusades, they think, boop, knights ended up in the Holy Land. No. There was the entire path through Europe. And it wasn't an incidental, as you will see from these episodes, an incidental affair to move across Europe with tens of thousands of homeless people. Almost none of us had any idea of how far the journey would be. When you hear your Bible tales in your local village, most of these people would never travel more than 10 miles away from the place they were born in their entire lifetime. To make a pilgrimage, like in the Canterbury Tales, where people would just go from one area in Bath County over to the local cathedral once in their lifetime, maybe. Many could never afford to do it even then, so the people that would make this pilgrimage, they would come back and tell the tales to reinforce the reverence of the people in the local villages, and they themselves were seen as somewhat in awe, as Peter the Hermit, my character, starting to become as I lead the masses out of Cologne. The two Walters, of course, they're impatient, and because we have learned that the Normans are simply to force. Normans are a lot like a sub-class of Vikings. The Normans ended up settling in the two islands, Corsica and Sardinia. They conquered Sicily and took over lower Italy and the boot there. The Normans were in northern Europe, northern France, the Frankish territories. William conquered England, took over it from the Saxons. The Normans were a very powerful force in 1096, our present day and year, in 1096. So they're starting to assemble. They see the benefit of conquering another place. And the Normans are very opportunistic. They tried to, many times in the decades before, to attack and take Greece away from the very man we're supposed to help, Alexius, of the Emperor of Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire. I know I'm going to pepper in the history. You just got to forgive me with this because it's part of the background lore. Why people would leave their homes and march all the way across places they don't even know. And so with the Normans entering the affair, the Walters feel that the Turk lands will be all pillaged before they even get there. It's a classic, the eagerness of young men to go to war. Now, I, Peter the Hermit, I'm a former soldier, and I'm quite happy to tarry. Life is pretty good in Cologne. I mean, people are coming to me, they're asking for blessings, it's all pretty flattering. Still, we decide that we're going to have to send a messenger out and ahead of us and to go to the King of Hungary, King Koloman. He's known as King Koloman the Book Lover. So very staid man, loves his court and his family, his affairs and his parties. He doesn't really want to leave his capital city. We never officially are granted any permission to march across his territory, but we go on the assumption that our goal is pious. That'll be a mistake. And we are escorted in our vanguard, our front, by the lesser German nobles, or Gorschak and Oren. We begin out on our eastward trek, and the sight of our column, sight of this column of men just moving across the landscape, taking whatever they want, because God has forgiven us, it's incredibly frightening, and we don't appear any different than the Goths or the Huns or even the Kuman hordes that have invaded in the centuries before. And this is just slightly more than 100 years before the Mongols try to take over Europe and overrun the place. So for us, things seem pretty fine. But for the locals, they're wondering who this group of people are, because most of us are foreigners, too. Unfortunately, along the way, there's an argument, and this the chroniclers have talked about, where the sale of a pair of shoes, it sparks a riot. And my crusading pilgrims, sadly, they start to attack some of the villages on market day. This, outside of a church on the borders of Hungary, the stalls and the carts are looted, and hundreds of Hungarian peasants are slain. How dare they stop us from our holy pilgrimage? Well, let's get back to the dice roll here. That's going to sound like it's a pious quest. We're not going to deal with the nobles here in kingly deliberation. We're going to go ahead and take a whack at these guys. And here comes my D6 roll, the 3. I need to defeat a D6 fell ones to foster faith. 6, well, it's going to be a lot of fell ones, but by doing so, I'm going to add a fostering faith, and I can use that sort of as a wild card. I should get an icon over here. Count my fostering faith, because my fostering faith I can use as sort of a mulligan to redo the dice roll in the mechanics that I'm playing. Or you can use them if you're playing one-on-one or one with a group of your players. You can use it as a tally, a positive tally toward reaching your climax. Test of prowess, die 6. fell ones. Now, if I get a good, nice, mighty roll, I can defeat all 6 fell ones. Now, I have the 2 Walters helping me and Alexander, so don't assume that it's just me facing 6 men in this Hungarian market. No, it's the mob is right, and we're slaughtering. And 6 men-at-arms decide they need to stand up to me. So here comes my dice rolls, and 2d6. Again, you can see how with my test of prowess, I picked the game Quintessential Paladin, because in many ways I'm just in God mode here. And we're about ready to end this episode anyway with this act. And the mighty, with that 6, I have 1, it's a 7. I defeat all the fell ones. D6, total of 6 fell ones. Boom, 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 boom. Did I do 6 bumps? Okay. And down they go. It's certainly a very ignoble start. My force must quickly abscond from the area under cover of night to escape retribution, because King Colomon's army is obviously going to hear about this.
Many needed shoes. I wanted Michael to have his first pair. They need only be sandals, and he earned them. I had him properly shod when the first scream started. If the actor was raping, I would see him hung, indulgence or not. One cry turned to a flurry of screams and added baritone sounds of men, dogs barking and the cracking sound of metal striking metal. I ran down the street calling the men to stand down, move back to the gathering point. Food will be warm and waiting. The vanguard of Swabians was already engaged. There was little to see and less to know. One side could be slaughtering the other. Both sides could be stuck in a tit-for-tat blows. A thump signaled at least one forester of the village had a proper arm. Michael actually caught the bow shot. I tousled his hair as we circled back to back with Alexander and the 2 Walters. We need to get the men back and sort this out, all agreed. No parley would follow. As one fight stopped, 2 more were starting. I noticed soon a leather jerkin, the outfit of the King of Hungary. I wondered if we were ambushed. I later reasoned we ambushed each other. A disagreement on a sale escalated to punches and then knife work. Brother Bart claimed the whole was started by greedy Jews. He blamed everything on the Jews. I faced my 6 constables and won. My companions were no slouches either. Blades were scarlet. No wonder the Orthodox Emperor did not use his own forces to invade the Holy Land. These foes were too pampered, unprepared, unable to fight for any length. King Colomon the Bookish, he might have well taught them to read instead. They'd have honest work alive rather than die by my illiterate hand. In the aftermath, Alexander asked me if I'd like to learn to read. Maybe, when I've drunk my fill of milk and honey in the Promised Land.
We end up off of the route and lost in the wilds. That's where I'm going to end today's episode. More later.